Good evening and welcome to the Genesis Science Report. I'm David Rives, and coming up on tonight's show, we'll examine a legendary 35-year experiment that scientists claim proves evolution in action. I'll be joined by Dr. Chris Rupe to break down the long-term evolution experiment and reveal why its results may actually point to genetic decay rather than evolutionary progress. Later, we'll investigate fossilized bird footprints that scientists claim are 60 million years too early in the fossil record. We'll explore how these tracks challenge evolutionary timelines and support the biblical creation model. But first, once upon a time, belief in creation was labeled as fringe. No, it didn't start that way. Creation was the bedrock of most famous scientists and their discoveries. But a few generations ago, slowly but surely, there was a march through many institutions that pinned Bible-believing Christians as extremists and fanatics. Many school children were required to watch the 1960s classic film Inherit the Wind in their classes. Now, one of the well-known lines from this film was preached by Dick Tracy.
You can do one, you can do the other, because fanaticism and ignorance is forever busy and needs feeding. And soon, Your Honor, with banners flying and with drums beating, we'll be marching backward. Backward!
Yeah, that film is exactly the caricature that characterized the last 50 years. The lawyer and the teacher were enlightened. Of course, they believed in evolution. I mean, the ignorant, the idiotic, dangerously fundamentalist, close-minded townsfolk, they had their heads in the sand, and predictably, they believed in creationism. But the tables are being turned, and another cultural revolution is happening as we speak, in part by this show and our efforts, which have reached tens of millions over the last 16 or 17 years. According to Barna, over half of Gen Z, those aged 12 to 28, are open to Jesus, the highest amount that they've seen in at least a generation. In fact, Barna's research indicated that 3/4 of U.S. teens want to learn more about Jesus. So what are they open to? Are they open to some backward culture? Or are the eyes of this generation being opened to truth? Are the multiple layers of deceit being eradicated? We say yes. As an example, the world's most popular podcast has been giving a decent amount of airtime to dangerous, Bible-believing Christians, as well as those open to Christian teachings. Watch this clip of Mel Gibson on the Joe Rogan podcast.
Every single one of those guys died rather than deny their belief. And nobody dies for a lie. Nobody.
You believe that was a real event?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
What brought you to that belief? Is this something that you've always had, or is it something you studied it and you've come to this conclusion because of the historical accounts? And
So he's talking about the disciples of Jesus and how they had given their lives for the truth of the resurrection. Now, Gibson is, by many accounts, the most popular actor of the last generation, and he ferociously and winsomely stated the powerful case of the death, the burial, and the resurrection of the Lord Jesus Christ. These are the kind of truths that are breaking through. Believing in God is becoming cool again. And in the same interview, Gibson doubles down, and he calls evolution the Darwin thing. Watch this.
what are your thoughts on evolution?
Wow. The Darwin thing?
Yeah.
I don't really go for it.
He makes it sound like it's crazy to believe in that kind of magic that we call evolution. In fact, things seem to be turning on their head. Perhaps people are beginning to catch on that Darwinism is as crazy as it really is. In another interview, Joe Rogan says, well, if evolution is real, and Tucker Carlson interrupts him and retorts, well, is it real? Play the clip.
Evolution is real. And if there is this
Is
constant,
it real?
I don't know, but it's visible. Like you can measure it in certain animals.
You can measure adaptation.
Yeah.
But there's no evidence that in fact, I think we've kind of given up on the idea of evolution.
I love it. Tucker goes on, he actually mocks, he derides the idea of evolution, saying that it's been rejected, that it isn't true. He dismantles the idea of the fossil record backing up evolution. It doesn't. He makes a very strong case that it's a fantasy. And these are the most watched conversations and personalities of the last several years. They're stirring conversations. Creation isn't being viewed as fringe, as this weird idea by the vast majority of people anymore. No, these topics are beginning to fill conversations like never before. And finally, Christian apologist Wesley Huff makes a reasoned and methodical case of the literal and historical resurrection. Joe Rogan asked this question. He said, how do you fact check someone being raised from the dead? And Huff goes through the list of incredible things that back up the fact that the resurrection really did take place. Play the clip.
So,
how do you fact check someone coming back from the dead?
Well,
how many people saw his body, right?
Well, Paul says that 400 people saw him all at once.
400 people saw the crucifixion?
No, saw the resurrected Jesus. Yeah, 1 Corinthians 15, Paul says that Jesus appeared to the disciples, and then he appeared to 400 people all at once.
Joe Rogan asks question after question, and Wesley Huff answers the questions. He gives a defense for the hope that he has. And he states with clarity that others arose to declare themselves, oh, we're the Messiah, we're the Messiah. And he said that they died and the movement died with them, right? Which means that they weren't really the Messiah. The truth is that people are asking questions because we've had a web of lies spun over generations. But you, who dare to think for yourselves, are seeing through the lies. Those around you are beginning to wake up. They're beginning to see that belief in creation, the belief that God created this world around us, makes so much more sense than the alternative beliefs of atheistic humanism, of naturalism, of evolutionism. Hundreds of millions of people are being exposed to these truths, and hundreds of thousands are being exposed as a result of this program as you watch right now. I challenge you to join the movement. Get involved with what we're doing right now. The number is at the bottom of the screen. The email is down there at the bottom of the screen. You can donate. You can send this video to everybody you know. You can schedule a meeting with one of our team members to volunteer your help. We are living in a time of a truth revolution. Be encouraged. Stand up. Speak out. Be bold. I'm David Rives, and this is the Genesis Science Report. Is there such a thing as a sure proof that God is real, that creation is true, and that we can believe the Bible?
We have a fixed amount of energy and matter in this universe. But if the universe had a beginning, naturally, everything had to have come from nothing.
Wow.
Which is the most immense violation of the first law that you could imagine.
On wonders without number. Friends of Genesis Science Network, we started this channel to make an impact in the lives of both Christians and inquiring skeptics around the world. It has done that in unbelievable ways. Now, one of our viewers wrote, I've been watching your channel for nearly a week now, and I would like you to know the blessing that it's been to me. I've never had the finances or the opportunity to attend a university, but I've been a believer for the last 37 years. Your channel has done more for my understanding of my faith than any book I've read save the Bible, and I feel like I'm finally able to attend the lecture classes I've always wanted to. Thank you so much for your ministry. I want to thank you for your generous support. GSN is no simple project and requires monthly commitments to keep it on the air. Please consider becoming a partner with us today. Just call 931-212-7990 or click Give on our website. We are making a difference. I'm David Rives, and you're watching the Genesis Science Network. Welcome back to The Report. It's time to tackle a viewer question in our Genesis Science Q&A. This week's submission comes from Seth H., who says, honest question. If God knew Satan would rebel and cause so much chaos, why even create him in the first place? Seems like setting up humanity for trouble. Seth, thanks for the question. I can't even begin to say that I understand God's grand design through every choice that he made, but I do know that he has purpose for every single thing that he's either done or allowed. Now, the Bible is chock full of patterns of prophetic repeating symbols, and when something happens, you usually see that there's a reason for it if you dig into the text, or even further along in history, you find out that there was a reason for that happening. So Satan was a created being, and he was originally good, as were all of the angels. But it appears that God allowed Satan to decide whether or not he would follow God. He was originally he was a covering cherub, a covering angel, which means that he actually had authority and an important position. But it wasn't enough. He decided that he wanted to take over God's position, the position of Yahweh. So he rebelled, and obviously he was allowed to. Again, we have to think that God, knowing all things, had a reason for allowing that rebellion, but we can't say for sure what that reason is. I mean, we're not looking at the big picture like he is. It's more of a theological question, not so much of a science question. And on The Report, there's no way that we can answer it using science. But what we can learn from this entire account is that if at the end of day 6, when humans were created, God called everything very good, well, that it would imply that Satan hadn't turned on God at that point. So that would indicate that after Adam and Eve were created, Satan then saw his opportunity to gain more authority and not only pull a portion of the angels with him in that attempt, but even potentially get humanity on his side by tempting them in the garden. So it actually offers a lot of insight into the history and the chronology of the book of Genesis. And I think that there's a whole lot more to glean if we just keep studying it as it is, as a historical narrative inspired by God. Now, we love connecting with our viewers, so remember to keep those questions coming. You can share them with us on social media or via email. Just email comments at genessissciencenetwork.com. Now, for those interested in this week's Q&A topic, be sure to check out this week's featured resource, The Fall of Satan, Rebels in the Garden. Written by author and apologist Bodhi Hodge, this compelling book tackles 35 captivating questions about Satan's origin, his rebellion, and ongoing influence, offering biblically sound insights into the nature of evil and its impact on creation. Have you ever wondered how a being created good could become the very embodiment of evil himself? Or why a perfect and all-powerful God would allow such evil to persist? In a world where the existence of Satan and the reality of evil are often denied or mocked, this book provides essential answers grounded solely in Scripture. Equip yourself with truth, strengthen your understanding, and confront today's challenging ideas with confidence through The Fall of Satan, Rebels in the Garden. You can find your copy by visiting the Creation Superstore or online at creationsuperstore.com. What is an ocean animal that both fascinates and terrifies us? This is the Kids Corner. Now, a lot of people would say, oh, it's a shark. When we think of sharks, the most common image that we have in mind is of the great white shark, but there are actually more than 500 different species of sharks that range from about a foot long to the enormous whale shark measuring more than 60 feet long. Now, sharks are classified as true fish, even though they don't have scales or bones. So the outer skin is covered with dermal denticles, which feel kind of like very small, hard bumps. But instead of a bony skeleton, the shark skeleton is made up of flexible cartilage, like what you have in your nose or in your ears. So their jaws are made of cartilage, their backbones are made of cartilage. It's a much lighter material. The only super hard body part of a shark is their teeth, and their teeth are arranged in multiple rows. Now, while only one row of teeth will show from the front, there are actually multiple rows of teeth laying flat behind the front row. Now, sharks tend to forcefully and violently slash their victims, and in the process, sometimes they lose a tooth. Well, this is quickly replaced by a new tooth folding into place, and you can see this is a much larger tooth. So a great white shark will go through many thousands of teeth throughout their lifetime. So a lot of people think that they think the great white shark is, must be the largest shark. And they can be nearly 20 feet long, but there are other sharks that are also huge, including the hammerhead shark, which can be just as large. Now, the largest shark of all is the whale shark, which is a true shark. It's not related to whales at all, but the largest whale shark known measured a whopping 61.7 feet long, 3 times the size of the largest great white shark. But don't worry. Whale sharks are completely harmless as they are filter feeders, feeding almost entirely on plankton. Now, the scariest shark to ever live is the extinct megalodon shark, which is estimated to be up to 67 feet long. That's about the same size as a school bus. Guys, this megalodon tooth that I'm holding, it measures about 5¼ inches long, but some have been found measuring up to 7 inches long. Would you want to go swimming with something that had these for teeth? What did they eat? Well, anything they wanted. This is a fossil whale vertebrae, and these have been found with the tips of megalodon teeth broken off and embedded in them. Aren't you glad that these sharks are extinct? The last of the megalodon sharks were probably killed and buried around the time of the Genesis flood, several thousand years ago. And I'm not complaining, but it sure is amazing to think of something that big swimming around that could take down a whale. After the break, we're taking a closer look at one of the longest-running scientific experiments ever conducted, the long-term evolution experiment. Has it really proven evolution in action, or does it reveal something very different like genetic decay? Dr. Chris Rupe joins us to break down the data and explain what this means for evolutionary theory. Stay tuned. The birds of the air, they were created by God in the beginning, but they are so diverse right now. He is being handed this magnificent creature.
This bird is designed. He is chock full of design. This doesn't just happen. He'll fly over your head and he'll land and you can't hear a thing.
Is that right?
It's incredible. God thought of everything when He made them.
On Wonders Without Number. I want to thank you for supporting GSN this year. Your support is helping us send this broadcast to millions of households around the globe. You know, in a society where the theories of Darwinian evolution are bombarding our youth via schools and universities and through peer pressure, we need to saturate the airwaves with the truth of real biblical science, and you are making this happen. Your one-time, monthly, or generous end-of-year tax-deductible love gift keeps this network streaming 24/7 at no cost to our viewers. Thank you for your support. I'm David Rives. Truly, the heavens declare the glory of God. Is there a biblical view of animal rights?
We've actually got a report that was in one of our British newspapers a little while back. Don't kill mosquitoes, let them take blood donation. Now here's a great example of being futile in your thinking, right?
Right.
At what point should we be looking after animals? At what point should we be treating animals as if they were humans? So it's a really popular topic.
On Wonders Without Number. Welcome back to the report. For decades, evolutionists have claimed that the evidence for evolution is overwhelming. They argue that small, beneficial mutations over time can lead to major evolutionary advancements, and that given enough time, these mutations add up to create entirely new species. Now, one of the most famous scientific experiments used to support this idea is called the long-term evolution experiment, the LTEE, a study that began all the way back in 1988 and has been running for over 75,000 generations of E. coli bacteria. Now, the experiment, led by evolutionary biologist Dr. Richard Lenski, claims to provide direct observational proof of evolution in action. But here's the big question. Are these truly examples of evolution creating new information, or are these genetic changes actually signs of something very different? For example, de-evolution, genetic decay. Joining us to analyze the claims of the long-term evolution experiment is Dr. Chris Rupe. Dr. Rupe received a bachelor's degree in biology in 2009. From 2011 to 2018, Dr. Rupe collaborated with former atheist and renowned geneticist Dr. John Sanford of Cornell University. Now, their research focused on human origins and population genetics, including the famous long-term E. coli evolution experiment. After working with Dr. Sanford, Chris went on to receive a PhD in the geological sciences. Now, he's a sedimentary geologist and the founder of Back to Genesis Ministry based out of northeastern Ohio. Dr. Rupe, welcome to the show.
It's great to be with you. I'm very excited.
It is great to have you here. I can't wait to bring you in studio soon. But listen, the long-term evolution experiment is one of the most famous studies in evolutionary biology, because obviously it's been going on so long, and it appears to show how all of these different colonies of bacteria are simulating millions of years of, let's just say, human growth. Can you explain how the experiment was set up and what scientists were trying to prove from the beginning?
That's right. So as you said, the experiment has been going on since 1988. It's surpassed 75,000 generations. It's probably getting closer to 80,000 generations, and the E. coli are still surviving. So he started with a single ancestral strain of E. coli. He split it into 12 populations. So these are clones because they're asexually reproducing. And every day he would transfer the flasks. He would transfer the populations to a fresh glucose flask to keep them alive. And he also added citrate as an additional food source that could be used only under special circumstances, which we'll talk about. And then he would have them undergo competition assays. So he would use the ancestral strain, which is supposedly unevolved, and he would cause it to go into competition with the so-called evolved strains, and then they would measure fitness gains based on cell count, so how quickly they consumed glucose relative to the ancestor. And then periodically he would actually sequence the genomes of these so-called evolving populations to track mutations and compare it with the ancestral genome.
I gotcha. Okay, so a lot of people are claiming that the results of this experiment is actually providing us with cemented proof that evolution is true. What are the findings of this experiment, and are they actually showing evolution in action?
So they claim that there were numerous beneficial mutations, which is true, at least according to how they defined fitness. We'll discuss that in a moment later. So after about 100 trillion cell divisions and 100 billion mutations, less than 100 beneficial mutations were documented. And these mutations were argued to result in measurable fitness gains. And as you showed on screen a moment ago, the greatest fitness gains occurred early in the experiment within the first 20,000 generations. And so you can see this graph here where around 5,000 to 10,000, the fitness rapidly improves, and then it begins to level off. By around 20,000 generations, it really hadn't improved much after that. However, around 31,000 generations, the E. coli produced a mutant feature that was considered a key evolutionary innovation, the ability to uptake citrate into the cell to be used as a food source. And this is the key, in the absence of free oxygen, and we'll get into that in a bit. In general, this is what a typical popular press science article is claiming that the experiment showed. This is from the Science magazine, and it's titled "The Man Who Bottled Evolution." It says Lenski and his colleagues saw what looked very much like an accelerated process of evolutionary change. By using bacteria instead of slower growing organisms, Lenski compressed time. The E. coli go through 6.6 generations in a day. In 25 years, he's seen the equivalent of 1 million years of evolution in humans.
Okay, so that's what I'm reading one of these articles that covers this, and it says that there are about 75,000 generations at the time of this writing, the equivalent of seeing the human lineage transform over more than 1.5 million years. So you're looking at the generations, right? But then, as you mentioned, around 31,000 generations in, one of the colonies, it says, learned to feed on sodium citrate. So this E. coli has all of a sudden, it's taken on a different mechanism. My question, I guess very simply, would be, is it still considered E. coli?
Well, yes, that's definitely the case. So this is some very fascinating information to understand. Every possible mutation at every nucleotide site, meaning every DNA letter site in the E. coli's genome, has mutated many times over. And they state that since the bacteria have short generation times, it's supposedly equivalent to over 1 million years of evolution in humans, as you mentioned. Yeah. So if any experiment were capable of experimentally validating the theory of evolution, it should be this one. Right. That's precisely what they're claiming. Yet we think the results of this experiment are one of the most powerful evidences for biblical creation, which is ironic because the experiment was led by a leading evolutionary geneticist at a major university, and it's claimed to be to powerfully demonstrate evolution in the laboratory. Yet what it has actually demonstrated is the exact opposite of evolution. What we're observing at the molecular level in this experiment is de-evolution, or genetic entropy, which is a term coined by geneticist Dr. John Stanford. Yeah. So, as I mentioned, the most dramatic fitness gains occurred early in the experiment, within the first 20,000 generations. After this, fitness had largely leveled off with minimal gains since then. Now, I spent a few months doing a literature review of each of the so-called beneficial mutations that resulted in the greatest fitness gains. And in every case, the beneficial mutation was caused by a loss of regulation, a loss of function, deactivations, reduced gene expression, and deletion of genes and metabolic pathways. So in other words, it was going in the opposite direction of genome building evolution.
Yeah, it's switching off of genes, or deactivation or deletion, or it's going in the wrong direction. And again, it's still, even though it's producing change, which we don't deny, it's not producing a different type of a creature. These E. coli bacteria are still functioning pretty much like E. coli to this day. And yet a lot of people use this experiment to make light, right? There's one article I have here. It says fanatics convinced that a God created the world as it is. So I would be in there. I guess I'm a fanatic. The so-called creationists have viciously attacked Richard Lenski. Okay, so fanatics are viciously attacking a man, which I beg to differ. We are simply looking at observational data of a man's experiment, and we are questioning that the data is going anywhere where they had predicted it. In fact, it's pointing towards the opposite. In fact, this article right here says Lenski, even though, this is the most exciting thing and it's proof of evolution, Lenski, a co-author of the new study, is cautious. He himself is cautious of this. So we've got all of these things going on, and what we realize is that these bacteria are quickly adapting to an environment. You mentioned that it happened early on in the generational count, and then as soon as they quickly adapt to that environment, then they're not continuing to do anything. It's the opposite of evolution.
Yes.
Can you talk just another brief moment about this?
Yeah, so what I was going to say is that nothing continues to happen except more de-evolution. So yeah. Some people might, and by the way, the article mentioned creationists viciously attacking the Lenski and the experimenters. I don't know any creationists who have done that. Actually, those that I know who have studied it, who are well-credentialed, scientists, creation scientists, we are delighted by his experiment. We think, again, it is a powerful demonstration of de-evolution. And, I have to add one thing. people might be thinking, well, if these beneficial mutations were supposedly beneficial and they claim that they were in their papers, and then on what grounds can they be considered beneficial if they're all due to loss of function, reductions, deletions? And so I want to give a couple of examples of why they think these loss of function mutations are beneficial. And it has to do with conserving resources. So let me give an example. There was a ribose operon. An operon is a cluster of genes responsible for the digestion of sugar, the sugar molecule called ribose. And all 12 of the so-called evolving populations deleted genes responsible for ribose catabolic function, which means the ability to break down those ribose molecules for digestion. This was considered beneficial because the nutrient medium consisted of glucose, and so it was energetically wasteful to produce genes that were not needed in the artificial laboratory environment. So by economizing resources, the bacteria were able to become more proficient on glucose, which was how they measured fitness. It was growth rate based on glucose. So they can jettison, ribose pathway. Same thing happened to the maltose pathway. Yeah. There was a mutation that arose in a transcriptional activator, and it resulted in loss of function of the maltose digesting pathway.
Yeah,
so,
Chris, this is basically, these are all examples of things that are beneficial in a very, very specific situation, but not necessarily a beneficial mutation. It's a loss or switching off of information over and over again. Thank you so much for being on the program, Dr. Rupe.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. If you want to explore Dr. Rupe's research further, you can go to Back to Genesis, Genesis.org for more information and many more articles. We are completely out of time, but I don't want you to go anywhere because we'll be right back with Viewer Voices after the break. Limestone, we see it all around the world, but what is it exactly and how did it get here?
But let's delve a little bit into limestone. This was found by our good friend John Mackay, our mutual friend John Mackay, a few years back, right? He was driving through the Peak District and he shouted, "Stop!" And he said, "I've seen limestone." And the driver was like, "We're in the middle of the Peak District, it's all limestone around here." No, I found some special limestone.
On Wonders Without Number.
Join us at the Wonder Center and Science Museum for this month's Unwrapped event, where we feature expert speakers presenting scientific and biblical discoveries.
It pays to learn history, folks.
We cannot create an aircraft even close to what these birds can do.
This changes the way we do biology.
Discounted tickets are available for an after-hours adventure, including museum admission with kids' hands-on activities, a planetarium movie, Tesla experience, and pre-show entertainment. Perfect for the whole family.
What you believe about the history of the world is going to affect the way that you study the world today.
You see a mathematical order here. You see the orthogonal lines. You see the repeating patterns.
You don't understand what it takes to make a cell. That's serious engineering.
Come be inspired as you learn. The evening presentation is free, but seating is extremely limited, so RSVP immediately at wondercenter.org.
Squids in limestone in the middle of the Grand Canyon.
But the big problem is, how did those fossils get deposited in the middle of a 7-foot thick layer? According to the narrative, is something like 36 million years in duration. I'm replacing the narrative with some type of rapid smothering event.
On Wonders Without Number. We are back and it's time to hear from you, our viewers. Our first Viewer Voices submission comes tonight from Paul Clark on Facebook. He says, "This ministry does a great analytical job presenting the true facts supporting Scripture, biological, physiological, and archaeological evidence that affirms the truth of Scripture. It's helpful in our society that has degenerated into the absurd lie of evolution. Evidence supporting evolution has been imaginatively manufactured without any real, true evidence. David Rives' ministry helps show this very well." Thank you so much, Paul. That is the mission of our ministry, and ultimately in supporting the creation account and the idea that we are designed, that we're not accidents of the cosmos, we are also supporting the truth of the gospel message. Now, our second testimonial comes from T. Ferris, who had this to say after he visited the Wonder Center. The Wonder Center was amazing and exceeded my expectations. So much information, and I loved how all of the info tied in with the Bible. What a treasure of a place to visit, and their frappes, so good. Thank you so much for that. Java Man Cafe is a must when you're visiting the Wonder Center. The frappes are truly excellent. Now, if you've been impacted by the work that this ministry is doing, we would love to hear from you. Connect with us on social media. You can donate. You can email us at comments@genesissciencenetwork.com. Now it's time to shift our focus to one of the most common technological wonders in our modern world. That would be what? Oh, our smartphone. On this week's Genesis Science Minute, we're looking at how the intricate technology inside of our phones points to something far greater than human innovation alone. Let's take a look right now.
In today's world, we have access to astounding technology. You might even be listening to this message on your smartphone. It's hard to comprehend the complexity behind that small device that fits into your pocket and allows communication around the globe while offering wireless access to the entire World Wide Web. It was planned and developed by scores of intelligent scientists, the culmination of decades of research and knowledge, yet it pales in complexity to the human body. Just as plain as the fact that the smartphone you carry was carefully designed and fashioned, it is also plain that when we look in the mirror, we see a body that was expertly fashioned and fearfully and wonderfully made by the Creator of heaven and earth. I'm David Rives. Truly, the heavens declare the glory of God.
For more information, visit David Rives Ministries at davidrives.com. DavidRives.com.
We appreciate you watching this program. You're using your brain. You're not having to use your smartphone. You may be using it to watch, but hopefully you're processing everything that is being said. Now at this point, it's time to jump into this week's Ministry Report. I had the incredible privilege of sitting down for a fascinating two-part episode of Wonders Without Number with Colonel Jeff Williams, a retired U.S. Army officer and veteran NASA astronaut. We explored the stunning wonders of creation as seen from space, the inspiration of Scripture, and the beautiful harmony between science and faith. Colonel Williams, who spent over 500 days aboard the International Space Station across 4 missions, shared awe-inspiring stories about his experiences in orbit. With a camera in hand, he captured breathtaking photographs of Earth, showcasing the vibrant designs and the patterns that are woven into our world. Now, his passion for sharing these images led to his book called The Work of His Hands, A View of God's Creation from Space. From the vivid colors of coral reefs to the intricate patterns of river deltas and sand dunes, we marveled at how these natural formations reveal really God's artistry. Jeff's background as an engineer further deepened his appreciation for the mathematical order presented in creation, evidence of a creator who designs with both beauty and with purpose. And we also talked about the divine inspiration of Scripture. Jeff and I reflected on verses like Job 26, which describes God hanging the earth upon nothing, a truth that stands in stark contrast to ancient cultural beliefs, but it aligns perfectly with modern scientific understanding of the vacuum of space. It was a conversation that's filled with practical illustrations of God's intelligent design, from weather cycles to agricultural systems that sustain life on Earth. So be sure to tune in to the Genesis Science Network for the latest episodes of Wonders Without Number and other inspiring content that explores science through the lens of our faith. Now, the prayers and generosity of our viewers continue to make all of this possible. Your monthly support helps ensure that we can continue to share the wonders of God's creation with individuals all over the globe. I want to invite you to partner with us in ministry right now by making a contribution today. You can visit our website or you can call 931-212-7990 to donate and learn more about this important work. Next, we're diving into this week's Heavens Declare, where we journey to Africa to observe one of the largest and most fascinating land mammals, the rhinoceros. With its armored body, incredible speed, and unique symbiotic relationships, the rhino is a testament to the ingenuity of God's design. What can this creature teach us about adaptation, about survival, and intention? Well, let's take a look right now.
Some of the biggest mammals in the world live in Africa. Right now, I'm in South Africa, leading about 40 people on a photo safari, and I've had the opportunity to see many of these massive mammals for myself, including the armored beast. It's called the rhinoceros. What an incredible sight. Most people think of Africa when they think of rhinos, but did you know that there are actually only 2 species, the black and white rhinos, that live in Africa? 3 other rhino species, the Sumatran and the Javan and the Indian, are scattered throughout various nations in Asia. All 5 rhino species are considered some of the most endangered species in the world. The most famous feature of the rhino? Their horns. They're actually quite valuable, so rhinos are being poached into extinction. Even rhinos in zoos have been killed just for their horns. Now, some safaris and zoos have tranquilized the rhinos to remove their horns, just so it wouldn't be killed by poachers. Rhinos used to live in northern Europe and even in Russia. Well, how is that possible? God designed each created kind, including the rhino kind, with an incredible amount of genetic variety so that they could adapt to a wide range of environments. So rhinos used to have the genetic information to produce a thick, shaggy coat. This allowed rhinos that were known as woolly rhinos to thrive for a time in colder regions. Of course, that actually wouldn't help a rhino survive in Africa or southern Asia. So the genetic information for thick coats, it was eventually weeded out. Now rhinos, they might look big and clunky, but don't be fooled. They can actually run 30 to 40 miles an hour if they need to. They've got a limited sense of sight, but listen, their sense of hearing and smell is keen. Smell is how they communicate with each other. The smell of their dung is actually very unique to each rhino. They can tell other rhinos whether they're male or female, young or old. They look pretty dirty because they'll lounge in the mud to cover that sensitive skin. It helps them stay protected from sunburn and insect bites. But they also allow oxpeckers to ride around on their backs. Those birds not only eat insects, but they also will alert the host rhino to danger. It's an example of a symbiotic relationship, mutualism, as the oxpecker gets a free meal of insects, but the rhino, it gets a free insect removal treatment. Rhinos, the second largest land mammals, are a testament to the creativity of the designer. Their strong, armored-looking bodies should remind us of the strength of our Lord, who has made everything for His glory and calls us to be good stewards of what He has made, including the rhinoceros. I'm David Rives. Truly, the heavens declare the glory of God.
That was from our last trip to South Africa. If you are interested in going on an 11-day South African safari, you need to get in touch with us right now because these book up incredibly quickly. It's an experience of a lifetime that you do not want to miss. Up next, a groundbreaking discovery has turned the evolutionary timeline upside down. Fossilized bird-like footprints that secular scientists had concluded existed 60 million years before the supposed first birds. So could this mean that birds and dinosaurs coexisted rather than one evolving from the other? Dr. John Whitmore joins us to break down the evidence and what it means for the biblical account of creation after the break. Hi, I'm David Rives, and I'm inviting you to visit the Creation Superstore, the largest Origins-related store in the world. Not only will you find every book and video title on creation versus evolution, science, but also every resource that teaches us about our origin and how it all takes us back to Genesis, a grand designer, the God of the Bible, and ultimately, yes, the gospel message. Documentaries your family can trust, fossils, teaching videos, children's books, church Bible studies, homeschool supplements, and expert scientific literature. If you can't find a title, call us up and we'll add it. Normally, you'd have to visit dozens of sites to gain access to all of the titles that are out there, and then you would be at a loss to whether the book or video was worth the purchase. But not here. We've curated the best of the best into top 10 lists. And on some of my favorite products, you'll find the Rives rating, where I help guide you on the best resources available for not only those who love history, biblical studies, and creation science, but also great products at the layman level, easy to understand for those who are learning or want their children and grandchildren to be exposed to a biblical worldview. Just look for the Rives rating to find my personal favorites. Use the search bar to look up a topic or follow our menu to sort by ministry, subject, or author. Give us a call at 931-212-7990 as you're browsing. We have ministry volunteers who will do their best to assist you at all hours of the day and even help you place your order. Yes, a real person. Get ready for a secure shopping experience brought to you by the leaders of creation-based research. Your purchase goes towards ministry outreach and also supports the authors and organizations who publish the material, most of whom are personal friends and colleagues of mine. I'm David Rives. Truly, the heavens declare the glory of God. Welcome back to The Report. In a recent interview, we explored the claim that dinosaurs evolved into birds, looking at the lack of fossil evidence supporting that incredible theory. But what if we took the question from a different angle? You see, a new study published in Popular Mechanics reveals fossilized bird-like footprints in southern Africa that they claim are 210 million years old. Now, that's supposedly 60 million years before the earliest known fossilized birds, such as Archaeopteryx. So if these tracks really belong to birds, well, then that means that birds and their alleged dinosaur ancestors existed at the same time, rather than birds evolving from dinosaurs. This is yet another example of the fossil record contradicting evolutionary expectations while perfectly aligning with the biblical account of creation, where God created birds on day 5 and land animals, which would include dinosaurs, on day 6. To help us analyze what this discovery means, both scientifically and biblically, we're joined by my friend, Dr. John Whitmore. Dr. Whitmore is Senior Professor of Geology at Cedarville University, where he's been teaching since 1991. At Cedarville, he developed the first geology major at an evangelical school that teaches Genesis as historical truth. He speaks internationally and guides raft trips in the Grand Canyon for Answers in Genesis and Canyon Ministries. He has many publications, including The Heavens and the Earth, a co-authored textbook for learning the basics of Earth science from a young Earth perspective. Dr. Whitmore, welcome to the show.
Hi, David. It's good to see you again.
It is great to have you back. Listen, let's start by breaking down exactly what was discovered in South Africa and just how significant are the findings?
Yeah, so these are footprints that have recently been reported in a journal called PLOS ONE. And the authors found some tracks, or actually reported on some tracks that were discovered back in the 1950s, so they'd been known a long time. And they're from rocks that are considered to be late Triassic. And what we're seeing in the image here are not the tracks that were found, but there's some tracks, similar tracks that are in Connecticut that have been known since the 1840s or thereabouts. And Edward Hitchcock drew these pictures, and he thought there were bird tracks back in the 1860s. It turns out some of them are dinosaur tracks, but some of them certainly could be bird tracks, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, but evolutionists claim that these newly discovered tracks are predating the evolution of birds, or the first known bird,
right,
by 60 million years. So how do you get around that problem?
So this is really incredible, and it happens a lot in the fossil record, where you find burrows or footprints or traces of organisms, and then the body fossils of the organisms show up much later. And it looks like this is the case in southern Africa, and Connecticut and Argentina and other places around the world where they found footprints like this. They sure resemble bird tracks, and these particular authors are claiming at least the tracks in southern Africa are bird-like tracks.
Yeah.
So the problem is that real birds, things everybody would call a real bird, don't show up in the conventional fossil record until 60 million years later. So, where are all the fossils from late Triassic up to the later in the Jurassic, where things like Archaeopteryx are found?
Yeah, and you've got theropod dinosaurs, which have 3 toes. Sometimes they might be mistaken for bird tracks, but those are typically larger dinosaurs. So what do we know about these footprints in southern Africa and around the world, and what features is it that makes them think, hey, this is a bird, not a dinosaur?
Yeah, well, the authors compared these tracks to some fossil tracks and some modern bird tracks, and made some measurements on the angles between their toes and their stride and things like that. And they claim they're bird-like tracks, of course, because they didn't find any birds, preserved in the record along with them. It's always hard to tell when you have a footprint exactly who made it, unless you have the trace maker right there at the end of the fossil trackway. So these authors think they're bird tracks, and there's been a number of other occurrences around the world, like in Connecticut, where people have claimed that they're bird tracks. And again, this is really amazing, because we don't find the first fossil birds in the record until much later.
Yeah, and you and I have both seen, amphibian trackways in the Coconino Sandstone of the Grand Canyon as you hike through. There are ichnofossils, or trackways that different creatures have laid all over the earth. But doesn't the very presence of dinosaur tracks or bird tracks or any type of footprints turned to stone, doesn't that indicate something that might lead us to more of a biblical conclusion?
Yeah, it sure indicates rapid burial. You wouldn't expect footprints to last around a long time if they were in sand or even mud or anything else. So, footprints are really any type of fossil means and indicates rapid burial, in my opinion. So the tracks in the Coconino, the same thing, rapid burial. And it's interesting. The Coconino Sandstone in Grand Canyon, we don't find the track maker there either. It's a big unknown as to who made the tracks, because we don't find the body fossils with the trackways.
Yeah, it's an incredibly interesting study. And you've studied Triassic rock formations in different parts of the world. So you've looked at the rocks as a geologist, and you've compared those to other places. How do Triassic rock layers compare to the ones in Africa where these footprint tracks were found?
Yeah, it's I did study for my master's thesis and for the USGS in Connecticut. Those rocks are late Triassic, early Jurassic in age, and I mean they resemble so closely rocks from the Grand Canyon that are Triassic in age. You go to other places in the world and look at Triassic rocks. I mean, you could almost be driving down the road and look out the window and say, hey, I bet those are Triassic rocks. And because, in my opinion, the Noah's flood produced a lot of the rock record, or at least a lot of the Paleozoic and Mesozoic rock record. And when you see rocks all over the world with the same fossils in it, it means the same processes were happening worldwide. It's not a local type of deposit. It's something worldwide that's happening. And so, in my opinion, these rocks were made during the flood.
Yeah, some of the rock layers that we find, let's just say in the Grand Canyon, as you mentioned, pop up all other places around the earth, and they're extremely similar in composition. They're extremely similar in the fossils that we find, and they're extremely similar in so many different ways. You have to ask yourself, well, it looks like this was some type of a global event that laid down this layer of strata. Tell me just a little bit about your work at Cedarville and the Young Earth Geology program there.
Yeah, so we've had a geology major here since 2009. We have just about 60 graduates now. I've lost count, but just some incredible young men and women. A lot of them have gone on to get PhDs or advanced degrees, working in all different kinds of fields. And we train them from both a biblical perspective and conventional view. I want our students to be able to interact with conventional sciences and scientists and be able to work in the conventional field as well. So our students are trained to critically think and be ready to go when they graduate from Cedarville.
And I think that's so important that we have a balanced approach with everything that is happening, because again, if they go on to take another a course or in their daily life as they move forward, they're going to encounter these evolutionary ideas. So to know what the evolutionary theories are and yet have the scientific evidence that supports a biblical model and how it all connects together, it strengthens our faith to understand that we have the high ground. We have the advantage in nearly every case if we stand on a biblical foundation and if we consider the historical record that is recorded in Genesis as literal history. Dr. Whitmore, this has been such an eye-opening discussion. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome, David.
You know, the discovery highlights yet again how evolutionary assumptions continue to be challenged by new evidence. While the biblical creation model, it's remained very consistent throughout history. For people who want to learn more, Dr. Whitmore's research is available through Cedarville University, and his textbook, The Heavens and the Earth, is a great resource for homeschoolers or college students, anyone looking for a solid biblical perspective on earth sciences. When we look around us at the world that is here, we find these evidences of design, these evidences of complexity. We find evidences of order, and order usually points back to someone who has made that order, someone who has put things in place, not random chaotic processes over millions or billions of years. I'm talking about the God of the Bible and ultimately Jesus Christ. And that's it for today. I want to thank you for joining us on the Genesis Science Report. And until next week, I want to remind you to keep looking up. I'm David Rives. Truly, the heavens declare the glory of God.